Thanks for tuning in. Today, we're reading on the Shortness of Life by Seneca. On the Shortness of Life emphasizes that life is not inherently short, but people often waste time on trivial pursuits and distractions. He advocates for mindfulness and the pursuit of wisdom, urging individuals to reflect on their lives and prioritize what truly matters. Ultimately, Seneca encourages readers to take charge of their time, recognizing its fleeting nature and the inevitability of death. On the Shortness of Life by Seneca the Younger. Most of mankind, Pauline, complains about the malice of nature, that we are born for such a brief span of life, that these intervals of time given to us pass so quickly. So rapidly that except for very few, the rest are deprived of life in the very preparation for living. Nor did the crowd, as they say, only lament this public evil, it also evoked the complaints of distinguished men. Hence that famous outcry from the greatest physicians, life is short, art is long, hence Aristotle's dispute, which is hardly fitting for a wise man demanding a nature of things, that she has granted life to animals only, so that they may produce 5 or 10 generations, whereas man, born into so many and great things, stands at a much shorter limit. We do not have a short time, but we waste much of it. A life long enough and richly given for the consummation of the greatest things has been granted. If it were all well placed, but when it flows away through luxury and negligence, when nothing good is spent on it, we finally feel that we have passed, compelled by the ultimate necessity, without understanding how. So it is, we do not receive a short life, but we make it so, nor are we lacking in it, but we are wasteful. Just as great and royal wealth, when it falls to a bad master, is dissipated in an instant, yet modest wealth, if entrusted to a good keeper, grows in use, so our age has much to offer to those whom arrange it well. What do we complain about concerning the nature of things? It has behaved kindly, life is long if you know how to use it. But one is held by insatiable greed, another by unnecessary labours of busy diligence, one is drunk with wine, another is sluggish in idleness, one is worn out by ambitions always hanging in foreign judgments, another is led by a headlong desire for trade around all lands, all seas, driven by hope of profit. Some are tormented by a desire for military service, never failing to be either attentive to foreign dangers or anxious about their own. There are those whom the ungrateful servitude of those in high places consumes. Many are held back either by the affectation of another's fortune or by their own complaints. The majority are tossed about by nothing certain, fickle and unstable, and displeasing to themselves by new plans. For some, nothing pleases them to direct their course, but they are seized by withering and yawning fate, so that what was said by the greatest of poets, in the manner of an oracle, I do not doubt is true, a small part of life is what we live. Moreover, indeed, all space is not life but time. Vices press and surround them on all sides, nor do they allow them to rise again or lift their eyes to the truth, but they press them down, immersed and fixed in desire. They can never return to themselves. Whenever some quiet happens by chance, they are tossed about like a deep sea, where even after a storm they roll about, never having a moment of rest from their desires. Do you think I'm speaking of those whose evils are known? Look at those whose happiness is sought. They are suffocated by their own goods. How burdensome riches are to so many! How many are exhausted by eloquence and the daily display of their talent? How many pale from continuous pleasures? How many leave nothing free behind them, surrounded by a multitude of clients? Finally, all of them, from the lowest to the highest, traverse. This one calls, this one is present, that one is in danger, that one defends, that one judges, no one claims to himself, another is consumed by another. Ask about those whose names are memorized, you will recognize them by their well-known names, that one is the devotee of that one, this one of that one, no one is his own. Then there is the most foolish indignation of some. They complain about the disdain of their superiors, who have not had time for them wishing to approach. Does anyone dare to complain about another's pride who himself never has time for himself? Yet that one has indeed looked at you, whoever you are, with a haughty countenance but sometimes turned back. That one has lowered his ears to your words, that one has received you at his side. You have never deigned to look at yourself or hear. Therefore there is no reason to attribute these duties to anyone, since indeed, when you were doing those things you did not wish to be with another, but you could not be with yourself. All the great minds that have ever shone agree on this one thing: they will never cease to marvel at the darkness of human minds. They do not allow their properties to be occupied by anyone, and if there is a slight contention over the boundaries, they rush to stones and weapons. They allow others to encroach on their lives, and indeed, they themselves even lead those who will possess it. No one is found who wants to divide his wealth. Each individual distributes his life to as many as possible. They are bound in holding on to their inheritance, while at the same time they have come to the loss of time, being most extravagant in that one's honourable greed. Therefore, it is pleasing to seize someone from the crowd of elders. We see that you have reached the very end of human life. The 100th year presses upon you or more. Come now, bring back to mind your age. Count how much you owe to that time, how much a friend, how much a king, how much a client has taken away, how much a lawsuit over your wife, how much the coercion of servants, how much busy activity through the city. Add the illnesses we have brought upon ourselves. Add also what lay unused. You will see that you have fewer years than you count. Recall with yourself when you were certain of purpose, how many days have passed as you intended, when you were useful to yourself, when your face was in its prime, when your spirit was undaunted. What in such a long life you have made of your work? How many have plundered your life without you realizing what you were losing? How much vain sorrow, foolish joy, greedy desire, flattering conversation have taken away from you? How little has been left to you of your own? You will understand that you are dying too soon. What then is the cause? You live as if you are always going to survive. Your fragility never occurs to you. You do not observe how much time has already passed. As if you had lost from fullness and abundance, perhaps the very last day is now granted to that one who is given either to a man or to a thing. You fear everything as mortals do. You desire everything as immortals do. You will hear many saying, I will retire from my duties at 50. The 60th year will release me from my obligations. And to whom, at last, do you receive the prize of a longer life? Who will allow those plans to go as you have arranged? Are you not ashamed to reserve the remnants of life for yourself, and to devote only that time to a good mind which cannot be spent on any matter? How late it is to begin living when it is time to cease! What a foolish oblivion of mortality it is to defer sound plans until the 50th and 60th year, and then wish to start life, which few have completed. You will see the most powerful men, raised up high, crying out for leisure, praising it, preferring it to all their goods. In the meantime, they desire to descend from that height, if it may be done safely, for as nothing outside disturbs or shakes, fortune collapses upon itself. The divine Augustus, to whom the gods granted more than anyone else, did not cease to pray for peace for himself and to seek vacation from the republic. His every speech was always turned to this, that he might hope for leisure. This sweet solace, even if false, delighted him in his labours, hoping that he would live on. In a certain letter sent to the Senate, when he had promised that his rest would not be devoid of dignity nor differ from his previous glory, I found these words, but this will be done more beautifully than it can be promised. Yet my longing for this most desired time has led me to teach something of pleasure from the sweetness of words, since the joy of things still lingers. Leisure seemed to him so great a thing that, because it could not be experienced, he anticipated it in thought. He who saw everything depending on him alone, who gave fortune to peoples and nations, considered that day the happiest on which he might cast off his greatness. He had experienced how much those goods, shining through all lands, produced through sweat, concealed how much hidden anxieties they held. First with citizens, then with colleagues, lastly compelled to arms against relatives, he shed blood on sea and land. Through Macedonia, Sicily, Egypt, Syria, Asia, and almost all shores, encircled by war, he turned his weary armies to external battles. While he pacified the Alps and subdued the enemies mixed in the middle peace and command, while he moved beyond the boundaries of the Rhine, Euphrates, and Danube, in the very city, swords were sharpened against Murena, Scipio, Lepidus, Egnatius, and others. He had not yet escaped the snares of these. A daughter and so many noble young men were terrors like an oath, already breaking the strength of age. And Paul, and again the feared woman with Antony. These wounds had been severed from his own limbs. Others were forming, just as a body, heavy with much blood, was breaking apart at some always failing part. Therefore he desired leisure, in this hope, and thought his labours rested. This was the prayer of one who could make it a prayer. Marcus Cicero, tossed among Catalines, Clodii, Pompey's, and Crassi, partly manifest enemies, partly dubious friends, while he struggled with the Republic and held it going down to ruin, at last withdrawn. Neither at peace in favourable circumstances, nor patient in adverse ones, whenever he curses that very consulship of his, not without reason but without end, praised. How sorrowful are the voices he expresses in a certain letter to Atticus, now with Pompeo's father defeated, still refuelling the arms of his son in Spain? What am I to do, he says, here, do you ask? I linger in my Tusculan half free. Then he adds other things in which he laments his previous age, complains of the present, and despairs of the future. He called himself half-free. But by Hercules, never will a wise man advance to such a lowly title, never will he be half-free, but always of complete and solid freedom, released and in his own right, and higher than the rest. For what can be above him who is above fortune? Livius Drusus, an intense and passionate man, when he had stirred up new laws and the misfortunes of the Gracchi, surrounded by a vast assembly of all Italy, not foreseeing the outcome of events, things which he could neither act upon nor was it free to leave once begun, was said to have cursed the restless life from its beginnings, declaring that he had never experienced a holiday, not even as a boy. For he dared, while still a minor and a youth, to commend defendants to the judges and to interject his favour into the forum so effectively that it is established that certain judgments were taken away by him. What was to prevent such immature ambition from bursting forth? You would know it would turn into a vast evil, both private and public, such audacity. Therefore he later lamented that he had never experienced any holidays from his youth, a man of sedition and a heavy presence in the forum. There is a debate whether he took his own life, for he collapsed suddenly from a wound received in the groin, with some doubting whether his death was voluntary, none whether it was timely. It is superfluous to mention more, who seemed most fortunate to others, while they themselves declared true testimony of their lives, hating every action of their years. But, with these complaints, they neither changed others nor themselves. For the words burst forth from him, feelings slipped back to their accustomed state. By Hercules, your life, even if it surpasses 1,000 years, will be reduced to its most inarticulate. Those vices will devour every age. This indeed is a period which, although nature runs, reason expands, it must necessarily escape you quickly. For you neither hold nor make delay for the swiftest of all things, but you allow it to depart as something superfluous and reparable. Above all, they are in number those who are occupied with nothing but wine and lust, for none are more shamefully occupied. Others, even if held by a vain image of glory, err handsomely, even if you enumerate the greedy, the angry, or those exercising unjust hatreds or wars, all these men offend with their strength. In the belly and lust there is an unworthy stain. Cast aside all their times, see how long they calculate, how long they plot, how long they fear, how long they worship, how long they are worshipped, how much they occupy their own and others' engagements, how much feasting, which is already an obligation. You will see how they do not allow themselves to breathe, either because of their own evils or their goods. Finally, it is agreed among all that no task can be well executed by a busy man, neither eloquence nor the liberal arts, since a distracted mind receives nothing deeper but rejects everything as if pressed down. There is nothing less of a busy man than living. No knowledge is more difficult. There are many professors of other arts, some of whom seem to have grasped certain subjects in such a way that they can even teach them. To live is to be learned throughout one's life, and, what you may marvel at more, to die must be learned throughout one's life. So many great men, having set aside all impediments, renounced wealth, offices, and pleasures, engaged in one endeavour until the very end of their lives, that they might know how to live. However, many of these have departed from life, confessing they did not yet know how to live, let alone these men know how to do so. Trust me, great is the man who rises above human errors. There is nothing to deliberate from his time, and therefore his life is the longest because, as much as it was possible, it was all free for him. Nothing remained uncultivated or idle from it, nothing was under another's control, for he discovered nothing worthy to exchange with his time, being the most frugal guardian. Thus it was sufficient for him. For them, however, it is necessary to have lacked, from whose lives much was taken by the people. And do not think that they do not understand their loss at some time. Certainly you will often hear from those whom great fortune burdens, among the crowds of clients or in legal actions or other honourable miseries, sometimes exclaiming, "I cannot live." Why should it not be allowed? All those who summon you take you away from yourself. That defendant has taken away how many days? How many has that candidate taken? How many has that old woman taken to declare her heirs? How many has that one feigning illness incited greed in those who seized? How many has that more powerful friend, whom he holds not in friendship, but in show? Count them up, I say, and take account of the days of your life. You will see very few and scanty things have remained with you. That one, having achieved the fasces he desired, wishes to lay them down and repeatedly says, "When will this year pass?" That one makes games, which he greatly values to win for himself. "When," he says, "will I escape them?" That patron is being torn apart in the whole forum, and fills all beyond what can be heard. "When," he says, "will the matters be brought forth?" Each one hurries his life and labours in desire for the future, weary of the present. But he who contributes every moment to his own uses, who orders each day as if it were his last, neither hopes for tomorrow nor fears it. For what is there that in a single hour can bring forth new pleasures? All is known, all has been perceived to satiety. Henceforth, let fortune order as it wishes. life is already in safety. Nothing can be added to him, nothing taken away, just as something that is already satisfied and full can receive neither desire nor appetite. Therefore there is no reason to think that anyone, because of grey hair or wrinkles, has lived long. He has not lived long, but has merely been alive. For what if you think that he has sailed a lot, whom a fierce storm, having seized him from port, carried here and there and tossed about by changing winds in the same spaces throughout the world? He has not sailed much, but has been tossed about a lot. I am accustomed to marvel when I see some seeking time and those who are asked so very easy. Each side looks toward what time is sought, yet neither looks at itself, as if nothing is sought, as if nothing is given. The most precious of all things is played with, however. It deceives them because it is incorporeal, because it does not come before the eyes, and therefore it is considered the least valuable, indeed almost worthless. People receive annual bonuses and allowances very dearly, and they invest either their labour, work, or diligence in them. No one values time. They use it loosely as if it were free. But see the same sick people, if death brings the danger closer, touching the knees of doctors, if they fear capital punishment, ready to expend all they have to live. There is such discord among their feelings, but if it were possible to present the number of past years for each, as the number of future years, how they would tremble seeing so few left, how they would spare them. Yet it is easy to dispense with even a small amount that is certain. That which is unknown when it will run out must be preserved more diligently. Nor should you think they do not know how dear a thing it is. You would say they are willing to give a portion of their years to those they love most dearly. They give without understanding, they give in such a way that they detract from themselves without increasing. But whether they are detracting, they do not know, therefore the loss of hidden detriment is tolerable to them. No one will restore years, no one will give you back yourself again. Time will pass as it began, and it will neither recall its course nor suppress it. Nothing will be disturbed, nothing will remind it of its swiftness. It will slip away silently, it will not be ruled by a command, nor will it be prolonged by the favour of the people. As it was sent from the first day, it will run, it will turn nowhere, it will delay nowhere. What will happen? You are busy, life hastens, meanwhile death will be present, to whom, willingly or unwillingly, you must be available. Is there anything more foolish than the opinions of certain men, those I say who boast of wisdom? They are busier at work, as if to live better they build their lives with the expense of life. They order their thoughts for the long term, moreover. Delay is the greatest loss of life, that first pulls each one out of the day, that takes away the present while promising the future. The greatest impediment to living is expectation, which hangs on tomorrow, it loses today. What is in the hands of fortune, you plan. What you gaze at, you dismiss. Where do you look? Where do you extend yourself? All that will come lies uncertain, live at once. Behold, the greatest prophet cries, and, as if inspired by divine breath, sings a salutation. Each best day flees from miserable mortals, the first of life. What are you hesitating for? He says. What are you waiting for? Unless you seize the present, you will have seized nothing. And thus, with urgency, it is necessary to contend with the swiftness of time, and as if from a rapid torrent, to draw from it with no end. This too very beautifully reproves endless delay, as it says not the best ages, but the day. Why are you secure and slow in such a flight of time, stretching out your months and years into a long line, however it seems to your desire? The day speaks with you, and about this very thing that is fleeing. Is there any doubt, then, that each best day flees from miserable mortals, that is, from those occupied, whose youthful spirits are crushed by old age, to which they arrive unprepared and unarmed, for nothing has been provided. Suddenly they fall into it, unanticipated, they did not realize they were approaching it day by day. Just as speech or reading or some more intense thought deceives those making a journey, and they feel they have arrived before they have approached, so this journey of life is continuous and very swift, which we make both awake and asleep at the same pace, is not apparent to those occupied except at the end. If I wish to divide what I have proposed into parts and discuss the arguments, many things will occur to me, through which I can prove that the life of the occupied is very brief. Fabian used to say, not those philosophical lecturers, but true and ancient ones, against the impulse of passions we must fight not with subtlety, nor with slight wounds, but by turning the assault away with a charge. I do not approve of quibbling, for one must crush, not pinch. However, so that their error may be rebuked, they must not only be lamented. Life is divided into 3 times, what has been, what is, and what will be. Of these, what we do is brief. What we are about to do is uncertain. What we have done is certain. For this is that which fortune has lost its right over, which cannot be brought under anyone's power. This the occupied lose, for they have no time to look back at what is past, and even if they have, the memory of regrettable things is unpleasant. Therefore they reluctantly recall their ill-spent time and do not dare to attempt again those things whose faults, even those which were stealthily stolen by some present pleasure, become evident upon reflection. No one willingly turns back to the past except for the one whose entire life has been under his own judgment, who is never mistaken. He who ambitiously desired many things, disdainfully scorned, impotently conquered, insidiously deceived, greedily seized, and extravagantly squandered, must fear his own memory. However, this is the part of our time that is sacred and dedicated, having surpassed all human misfortunes, withdrawn from the realm of fortune, which is not shaken by poverty, fear, or the assault of diseases. This cannot be disturbed or taken away. It is a perpetual and fearless possession. Each single day, and these in moments, are present, but all of the past time, when you wish it, will be there, at your command, ready to be inspected and retained, which the occupied cannot do. It is the mark of a secure and calm mind to roam through all parts of one's life, the minds of the occupied, as if in subjugation, cannot bend or look back. Thus, their life passes into the depths, and just as it is of no use to fill a vessel no matter how much you pour in, if there is nothing to catch and hold it. So it does not matter how much time is given, if there is nowhere for it to settle, it is transmitted through minds that are shaken and pierced. The present time is the briefest, indeed so brief that to some it seems non-existent, for it is always in motion, it flows and rushes. It ceases to be before it arrives, nor does it endure a delay more than the world or the stars, whose restless agitation never remains in the same spot. Therefore, the present time belongs only to the occupied, which is so brief that it cannot be grasped, and that very thing is often taken away from them as they are engaged in many matters. Finally, do you wish to know how they do not live long? See how much they desire to live long. Feeble old men beg for a few years' addition to their lives, they pretend to be younger, they flatter themselves with lies and fall for them as gladly as if fate were deceiving them. When some frailty of mortality warns them, just as those who fear death die not as if they are departing from life, but as if they are being dragged away. They cry out that they were foolish not to have lived, and if only they escape from that sickness, they will live in leisure. Then they think how futile their preparations were, how they did not enjoy what was lost, how all their labour fell to nothing. But for those whose lives are conducted far from all business, why should they not have spacious lives? Nothing is delegated from it, nothing is scattered here and there, nothing is handed over to fortune, nothing is lost through negligence, nothing is taken away through lavishness, nothing is superfluous. Everything, so to speak, returns. Therefore, whatever is sufficient suffices abundantly, and when the last day comes, the wise will not hesitate to go to death with a certain step. Who then do you perhaps call occupied? You should not think I am speaking of those who are driven out of the basilica by dogs, who you see either being splendidly killed in their own crowd or contemptuously in another's, who are called from their own houses to batter at the doors of others, or who exercise the infamous profit of a praetorian spear and sometimes the task of bleeding. The leisure of some is occupied, in a villa or in their own bed, in the middle of solitude. Although they have withdrawn from all, they are troublesome to themselves, whose life cannot be called idle, but a lazy occupation. Do you call him idle who, in Corinth, precious with the fury of a few, arranges anxious subtlety and spends a greater part of the day on rusty plates? Who sits in the wax as a spectator of boys fighting? Who separates the flocks of his animals by age and colour? Who feeds the latest athletes? What? Do you call them idle, who pass many hours at the barber's, while something grows back that night, while they deliberate on every hair? While they either restore disordered hair, or draw back from this side and that to their forehead? How do they get angry if the barber was a little negligent, as if he was shearing a man? How do they get incensed if something is cut from their manes, if anything lies out of order, unless everything falls into their curls? Who among these would not prefer the state to be disturbed rather than his own hair? Who is not more anxious about the beauty of his own head than about his safety? Who would not prefer to be more well-groomed than more honourable? Do you call these people idle, who are occupied between a comb and a mirror? What about those who have laboured in composing, hearing, and learning songs, while they twist the voice, which nature made straight, best, and simplest, into the most inert modulation? Whose fingers always sound some measure of a song within themselves, whose tacit modulation is often heard even when they are applied to serious, often sad matters? These do not have leisure, but idle business. I would not place the times of feasts here, Hercules, when I see how anxiously they arrange their silver, how diligently they gird their tunics, how suspended they are. how the boar emerges from the hunt, with what speed. Once the signal is given, the shaven men rush to their duties, how skillfully the birds are cut into not too large pieces. How curiously the unfortunate little boys wipe up the droppings of the drunkards. From these the fame of elegance and luxury is captured, and so much so that in every retreat of life their evils follow them, that they drink neither without ambition nor eat. I would not even count among the idle those who are carried to and fro in a chair or litter, and meet the hours of their journeys as if they may not abandon them. Others remind them when they should wash, when bathe. When dine, they are so overly softened by the excessive delicacy of their minds that they cannot know for themselves whether they are hungry. I have heard of a certain delicate person, if indeed it is to be called a delicacy to unlearn life and human custom, who, having been lifted from the bath between hands and placed in a chair, asked, "Am I already seated?" Do you think that this ignorant person, whether he is seated, knows whether he is alive, whether he sees, whether he is idle? I would not easily say whether I should pity him more for not knowing this or for pretending not to know. Indeed, they feel the forgetfulness of many things, but they also imitate many. Some vices delight them as if they were arguments of happiness. It seems too lowly and contemptible for a man to know what he is doing. They even think that many mimes should lie to denounce luxury. Hercules, many more things escape me than they pretend. And so much has progressed in this 1 century of the incredible abundance of vices that we can now accuse the mimes of negligence. Is there someone who is so overwhelmed by delicacies that he believes another whether he is seated? Therefore he is not idle. You may give him another name. He is sick. Rather, he is dead. He is idle who has both leisure and sense. This man, however, half alive, needing an indicator to understand the condition of his body, how can he be master of any time? It would be long to pursue each one, whose lives have been consumed by either games of chess or ball or the care of cooking in the sun. They are not idle, whose pleasures involve much business. For no one will doubt that they labour tirelessly who are held by the studies of useless letters, which among the Romans also has a great following. This disease was among the Greeks, to seek which number of rowers Ulysses had, which was written first, the Iliad or the Odyssey furthermore, whether they were by the same author, and other matters of this kind, which, whether you contain them or bring them forth, do not help a silent conscience, whether you appear more learned or merely troublesome. Behold, the empty pursuit of unnecessary learning has also invaded the Romans. These days I heard someone recount what each of the first Roman leaders had done. The first naval battle was won by Duilius. The first Curius Dentatus led elephants in triumph. Even now, although these do not tend toward true glory, they nonetheless revolve around examples of civil works. Such knowledge will not be beneficial. Yet it is what detains us in the showiness of vanity. Let us also send back to those questioning, who was the first to persuade the Romans to board a ship? It was Claudius, who was called Cordex for that reason, because the trunk made of several boards is called a cordex among the ancients, from which the public records are called codices, and the ships now also, according to ancient custom, which carry cargo through the Tiber, are called codicaria. Surely this pertains to the matter that Valerius Corvinus was the first to conquer Messana, and was the first from the Valerii family, after the city was captured, to have the name Messana transferred to himself. And gradually, as the letters changed among the public, he was called Messala. Will you also allow anyone to care that it was Zell Sulla who first let loose lions in the circus, when otherwise they were given bound? And this surely will be sent back, whether it pertains that Pompey first presented a fight of 18 elephants in the circus, with the deadly men commissioned for no good purpose. The leader of the state, and among the ancient leaders, as tradition has it, thought it memorable to lose men in a spectacle of extraordinary goodness. Do they fight? That is not enough. Do they struggle? That is not enough. They are exterminated by the huge mass of animals. It would be better for this to go into oblivion, lest someone afterwards learns and envies a thing that is least human. Oh, how much darkness great happiness casts upon our minds! He believed himself to be above the nature of things when he offered so many wretched crowds of men to beasts born under another sky, when he committed war between such disparate animals, pouring out much blood in the sight of the Roman people, soon to pour out more of his own blood. But later, deceived by the treachery of Alexandria, he offered himself to be stabbed as his last bond. Then at last he understood the emptiness of his boasting. But to return to the point from which I departed, and to show in the same subject the superfluous diligence of some, he reported that Metellus, triumphant over the defeated Carthaginians in Sicily, led 120 captured elephants, surpassing all the Romans. That Sulla extended the pomerium last among the Romans, which was never customary to extend from a province, but from land acquired in Italy among the ancients. It is more beneficial to know this than to affirm that the Aventine Hill is outside the pomerium, for one of two reasons, either because the plebs withdrew there, or because the birds did not yield auspices to Remus in that place, and countless other claims that are either stuffed with falsehoods or similar. For even if you concede that they all speak in good faith, that they write for performance, whose errors will diminish? Whose desires will they press? Whom will they make braver, juster, more generous? In the meantime, our Fabian was uncertain whether it was better to be moved by no studies than to be entangled in these. Only those who occupy themselves with wisdom are idle. Only they live, for they do not merely take care of their own age. They add to every age. Whatever years have been spent before them are acquired by them. Unless we are the most ungrateful, there were born to us the most renowned founders of sacred beliefs, who prepared life for us. We are led by alien labour to the most beautiful things, pulled from darkness to light. No age is forbidden to us. We are admitted into everything. And if it pleases us to exceed the narrow confines of human weakness by the greatness of the spirit, there is much time through which we can wander. We may dispute with Socrates, doubt with Carneades, rest with Epicurus, conquer human nature with the Stoics, exceed it with the Cynics. Since the nature of things allows all ages to advance together, why should we not give ourselves fully, in this brief and fleeting passage of time, to that which is immense, eternal, and common with the better ones? Those who run through duties, who disturb themselves and others when they have been madly busy, when they have walked through all the thresholds daily and have passed through no open doors, when they have carried a meritorious greeting through most diverse houses, how many of such a vast and distracted city will they be able to see, drawn by so many varied desires? How many will be removed by sleep, luxury, or inhumanity? How many will, having tormented them for a long time, hastily pass them by with simulated urgency? How many will avoid emerging through an atrium filled with clients, and will flee through the obscure entrances of houses, as if it were more inhumane to deceive than to exclude? How many will, due to yesterday's drunkenness, half asleep and heavy, await their miserable sleep to be broken by others, barely lifting their lips to mumble their names, rendered by the most arrogant yawning? We may say that those linger in true duties, who p. 336 have daily Socrates, Pythagoras, Democritus, and the other leaders of the good arts, who wish to hold Aristotle and Theophrastus as their very familiar ones. No one among these will be unoccupied. No one will let anyone leave him empty-handed, who comes to him happier and more fond of himself. No one will allow anyone to depart from him with empty hands. He may come at night. During the day he can meet all mortals. No one will compel you to die for these. All will teach you. No one will wear away your years. They will contribute theirs to you. The speech of none will be dangerous. The friendship of none capital. The lavish attention of none. You will carry from them whatever you wish. Through them it will not stop you from drinking as deeply as you desire. What happiness remains for him, what beautiful old age remains for him who has committed himself to their patronage! He will have those with whom he will deliberate on the smallest and largest matters, whom he will consult about himself daily, from whom he will hear the truth without insult, will be praised without flattery, to whose likeness he may shape himself. We are accustomed to saying that it was not in our power to choose which parents we would have. Perhaps given to us as men, however, it is allowed for us to be born according to our own choice. They are from the most noble families of intellect. Choose into which you wish to be adopted. You will not be adopted merely into the name, but into the very goods, which will not be sordid or meanly kept. They will become greater, the more you divide them among many. These will give you a path to eternity and will lift you to that place from which no one falls. This is the only reason for extending mortality, or rather turning it into immortality. Honours, monuments, whatever ambition has commanded by decrees or constructed by works, quickly falls down. Nothing ages without a long process and moves. But that which wisdom has consecrated cannot be harmed. No age will abolish it. No one will diminish it. The following, and then always subsequent, will contribute something to its veneration. Indeed, since envy lurks close by, we admire what is more simply far off. Therefore the life of the wise is much broader. It does not close him as it does others. He alone is freed from the laws of mankind. All ages serve him like a god. Is time passing? He comprehends this by memory. Is it pressing? He uses this. Is it coming? He anticipates this. He makes for himself a long life by gathering all times into one. Their life is the briefest and most anxious, who forget the past, neglect the present, and fear the future. When they come to their end, the wretched realize too late that they have been occupied so long doing nothing. Nor is it something that you might think proves they live long lives, because they sometimes invoke death. They are tormented by ignorance, uncertain feelings, and are confronted by what they fear. They often desire death for no other reason than that they fear it. It is also not an argument that you might think indicates a long life for them, as they often perceive the day to be long, that they complain the hours are slow when the time for dinner approaches. For whenever they are freed from their occupations, left in idleness, they boil over, not knowing how to arrange or draw out that time. Therefore they tend towards some occupation, and any time that lies in between is burdensome. By Hercules, they wish to leap over the middle of days as if the day of the gladiatorial games has been proclaimed, or when the arrangement of some other spectacle or pleasure is anticipated. For them, every hoped-for matter is a long delay. But that time which they love is short and swift, and becomes much shorter due to their own fault. For they flee from one thing to another, and cannot remain in a single desire. Their days are not long but unseen, on the contrary. How brief the nights seem, which they draw out in the embrace of courtesans or in wine. From this, too, the frenzy of poets feeds on fables of human errors, where Jupiter seems to have doubled the night out of pleasure in lust. What else is it to inflame our vices than to inscribe gods as their authors, and to give a license excused by divine example to this disease? Those nights may not seem brief to them, which they earn at such a great cost. They lose the day in expectation of the night, and the night in fear of the light. Their very pleasures are anxious and troubled by various terrors. And a concerned thought arises just as they rejoice, how long will this last? From this feeling kings have wept for their power, nor did the greatness of their fortune delight them, but the coming end terrified them. When the most insolent king of the Persians extended his army over the vast plains, and did not comprehend its number but its measure, he shed tears, because no one would survive from such a great youth within 100 years. But he was about to encounter fate himself, who wept, about to destroy others, some in the sea, others on land, others in battle, others in flight, and in a brief time to consume them, of whom he feared the 100th year. What of the fact that their joys are also anxious? They are not based on solid reasons, but are disturbed by the same vanity from which they arise. What do you think their times must be, even according to their own confession, miserable, when these too, by which they exalt themselves and rise above humanity, are of little sincerity? The greatest goods are anxious, nor is any fortune believed to be less good than the best. Another happiness is needed to guard happiness, and for those things that have succeeded, vows must be made. For everything that occurs by chance is unstable, and the higher it rises, the more opportune it is for its fall. No one delights in that which will fall. Therefore, it is necessary for those who prepare with great labour to have a life not only the briefest, but also the most miserable, so that they may possess more with greater effort. They pursue with labour what they desire, anxious they hold what they have obtained. Meanwhile, there is no longer any calculation of time that will return. New occupations replace old ones. Hope ignites hope. Ambition kindles ambition. The end of miseries is not sought, but rather the material they use. Have our honours tormented us? They take more of others' time. Have the candidates ceased to labour? The voters begin to do so. Have we laid down the annoyance of being accused? We find ourselves judging. Is there no longer a judge? There is an investigator. Has the management of others' goods aged through mercenary oversight? He is distinguished by his own wealth. Has Marius released his military boot? He exercises the consulship. Is Quintius hurrying to pass the dictatorship? He will be recalled from the plough. Scipio will go against the Carthaginians, not yet ripe for such a great task. The victor of Hannibal, the victor of Antiochus, the glory of his consulship, the guarantee of his brother, unless there is a delay for him through himself. He would be restored by Jupiter. Civil seditions will stir against the Saviour, but after a disdainful youth, the ambition of an old man will delight in equal honours with the gods. There will never be a shortage of either fortunate or miserable causes of anxiety. Life will be dragged on through occupations. Leisure will never be pursued, it will always be desired. Therefore, extract yourself from the crowd, dearest Paulinus, and retreat into a calmer harbour, not tossed by the span of life. Consider how many waves you have undergone, how many storms you have sustained, partly private, partly public, that you have turned upon yourself. Enough has been exhibited through laborious and restless proofs of virtue. Experience what it is to act in leisure. The greater part of life, certainly the better, has been given to the Republic. Take some of your time for yourself as well. And I do not call you to sluggish or inert repose, not so that you may emerge from the lively disposition in you to sleep and the dear pleasures of the crowd. This is not to rest. You will find greater things in all the works you have yet vigorously undertaken, which you will engage in while laid back and secure. Indeed, you manage the affairs of the world as abstinently as others, as diligently as your own, as religiously as public ones. In duty you will gain love, in which it is difficult to avoid hatred, but still, believe me, it is better to know the account of your own life than the public grain. Recall that vigour of the mind, most capable of great matters, from honourable service, but poorly fitted for a blessed life. And consider that you did not devote yourself from early age to the study of liberal arts so that many thousands of grain might be entrusted to you. You promised something greater and loftier about yourself. There will not be men exact in frugality and laborious work, so much more suited for carrying burdens are slow beasts of burden than noble horses, whose noble swiftness has ever pressed down under a heavy load. Consider also how much anxiety there is in subjecting yourself to such a burden, when it is for the sake of the human belly. Neither reason permits it, nor is it alleviated by equity, nor is the hungry populace turned by any prayer. Just within those few days during which Gaius Caesar perished, if anyone in the underworld had sense, bearing this most seriously, that he knew 7 or 8 days' worth of food remained for the surviving Roman people. While he linked bridges with ships and toyed with the forces of his command, the final malady also awaited those besieged by the scarcity of food. It stood nearly at the brink of destruction and hunger, and what follows hunger, the ruin of all things, imitating the mad and unfortunately arrogant king. What spirit did those possess who were entrusted with the care of the public grain, prepared to meet Gaius with stones, iron, and fire? They concealed their malice with the utmost dissimulation, as if reasoning would suffice. For there are certain things that must be treated with ignorance and sickness, knowing their disease was the cause of many dying. Retreat to these calmer, safer, and greater things. Do you think it is similar whether you ensure that the grain is transported to the granaries pure and free from the fraud of those carrying it and negligence, so that it is not spoiled by moisture and does not ferment, responding to both measure and weight, or whether you approach those sacred and sublime matters to know what the essence of God is, what pleasure, what condition, what form, what fate awaits your spirit, where nature composes us once we are released from our bodies, what it is that sustains the gravest matters of this world in the midst, lifts the light ones above, carries them to the highest fire, arouses the stars in their turns, and subsequently what marvels are full of wonders. Do you wish to look at these things with a mind left behind? Now, while the blood is hot, one must go to better things. In this way of life, much goodness awaits you, the love of virtues and practice, the forgetfulness of desires, the knowledge of living and dying, and the deep peace of things. Indeed, the condition of all those occupied is miserable. Yet the most miserable are those who do not even work at their own occupations, who sleep the sleep of another, walk in another's steps, and are commanded to love and hate, the most free of all things. If they want to know how brief their life is, let them consider what part of it belongs to them. When you see a toga often worn, when a famous name in the forum arises, do not envy. Such things are acquired at the cost of life. While one of them counts as a year, they will consume all their years. Some, before they climbed to the height of ambition, were left in their early struggling years. Others, when they had climbed through 1,000 indignities to the incompletion of dignity, wretchedly reflect that they laboured only for a title on a tombstone. The last years of some, while they are arranged in new hopes like youth, fail amid great and reckless efforts. That fellow, whom in the court the oldest and least skilled of litigators is capturing, spirit left him, that wretched man who, being weary of living, collapsed quicker than working among his own duties. That shameful man, who was drawn out for a long time, lifeless, to receive his accounts, laughed at by his heir. I cannot pass over an example that has come to me. Tyrannius was an old man of exact diligence, who, after his 90th year, when he had voluntarily received a vacation from his duties from Gaius Caesar, ordered himself to be laid down in bed and, as if lifeless, commanded to be mourned by the surrounding family. The household mourned the leisure of their old master and did not cease before sadness was restored to him through his labour. Is it really pleasing to die occupied? The same spirit is with most. Their desire for labour is longer than their ability. They fight against bodily weakness, judging old age to be grave by no other name than that it sets them aside. The law does not summon a soldier after the 50th year, nor a senator after the 60th. Men find it more difficult to obtain leisure from themselves than from the law. Meanwhile, while they are swept away and sweep each other away, while one breaks the other's peace, while they are mutually miserable, life passes without fruit, without pleasure, without any advancement of the mind. No one has death in sight, no one aims far away at hope. Some truly arrange even those things that are beyond life, great masses of tombs, dedications of public works, gifts at the pyre, and ostentatious funerals. But by Hercules, the funerals of those men, as if they had lived the least, are to be led to the torches and candles. This concludes On the Shortness of Life by Seneca. Thanks for tuning in. Hope to see you again.